All right, so c-betting versus checking as preflop aggressor in position. General, we want to check when we want to give up. We have low fold equity and low raw equity. So yeah, we completely missed the board, and the board is hitting our opponent's range, even though he's flatting from the big blind. So a board like Jack 7-6 or something like Jack 9-3, Queen 10-8. So these kind of boards where your opponent can have a lot of floats, a lot of pairs, a lot of draws, a lot of straights, and you don't want to bet those boards without any backdoor potential. But in general, you can bet fairly wide. As I mentioned, our opponent is fairly capped. He would rejam many hands pre-flop, especially the stronger holdings. So when we come back to this example here, as you can see, it's still a relatively connected board, and we only have a few give-ups, something like King 6, King 7, even the hands like King Deuce, King 3, King 4 we are betting. But and the thing is, we are just betting 2 big blinds into a pot of 5 big blinds, so it doesn't have to work that often. And our opponent still has all those kind of queen highs, king highs, a few ace highs, 8 highs, also offsuited combos, which he's just folding. And most of the time we have at least an overcard, some backdoor potential, and since we just bet so tiny, we can still bet fairly wide. And when we look at our checkback range, they're mostly gut shots, open-end straight draws, or second pairs. And with those kind of hands, most of the time we're going to continue on the turn. So as you can see here, we're basically playing our entire range, either bluffing or betting them on the flop or delaying the action to the turn. Yeah, but additionally, when there are also flush draws present, where your opponent can additionally check jam flush draws, you want to be very, very, very careful. But as I just mentioned, in general, the board is not too drawy. Even though the board is connected, you can c-bet fairly wide, as I just showed you. But please, that's why I'm repeating it so often, choose your hands wisely. You need to be able to put those hands into your checking range that are not strong enough to stack off, speaking about the draws. So we want to check, as I just mentioned, those hands which are weak draws, which have to fold versus all-ins, or can just call a turn flop raise and have to fold against a turn all-in. Second pairs when top and mid card are high cards. So let's say we have something like King Queen on Ace King anything, or we have Queen Jack on King Queen random. We have King 10 on Ace 10 random. So here where our second pairs basically don't need any protection. Additionally, the occasional traps, but the board shouldn't be too drawy. So top sets, or let's say the board is something like Deuce, Deuce 3 with pocket aces. Here and there you can throw in these kind of traps. So when do we want to bet? When we have clear value bets, when we can go broke, don't slow play. Since we get shorter and shorter, opponents are willing also more to gamble, to fast play their second pairs, weak top pairs, and you don't want to have any action killers on the turn. So in general, the shorter you become, and the board is somewhat dynamic, so it can change a lot on the turn, a lot of straights and flushes can get there, or a lot of overcards. So in general, if the board is low or mid, something like 8 high or 4 high, 5 high, 9 high, 10 high, you always want to bet your value bets, your value hands, because otherwise you might lose the setup. If an overcard comes on the turn, he might not put any more money in the middle, whereas on the flop you would have get his entire stack. So this is something you need to keep in mind. You only want to slow play when the board is basically, when it's a way behind or way ahead situation, so you have basically a lockdown on your hand. So and it's not so likely that your opponent has a vulnerable value hand. And this is especially the case on these kind of king queen, king jack, yeah, queen 10 type of boards. So yeah, bet your top pairs on drawy boards. The more floats possible, the lighter you should bet for value. Yeah, you want to bet polarized. Remember the king 8 hand, right? We would check back those middle strong draws and most of those second pairs, and we bet our hands like king 8, king 7, where we have good backdoors, gut shots, and can barrel many turns. Or if we have a decent draw, we can go broke with ace high flush draws, king high flush draws, or let's say a gut shot and a flush shot, open and straight draws with overcards. So you want to dominate many of your opponent's draws, or a lot of your opponent's draws. When you have a second pair and the gap is relatively high between the high card and the second card, so ace 3 on king 3 deuce, 10-8 on ace 8-5, king 6 on queen 6-4. Why? Because between the high card and the mid card, there are a lot of 6-outers present in our opponent's range, and by just folding them out, we benefit a lot. And especially in these kind of board textures, they're not really drawy, right? So he cannot have that many draws that can check raise us. So here, additionally, we also get some value from his weaker second pairs and his third pairs. Let's say the board is ace 8-5 and he has something like 4-5 suited, 6-5 suited, king 5 suited. He's calling all those hands, right? Also the occasional king highs. But now if we check back and the turn is a 9 or 10 or a 10 or a jack, we're probably not getting any more money from a 5 or king high. And additionally, if he has like a queen jack and he hits his queen or jack, this would be such a shame because we would have folded those kind of 6-outers. So I want to give you here an example. Unfortunately, I don't find the hand right now in my database, but it was also a hand I played when I was fairly deep against the shortest stack. As you can see, we have around effectively like 15 big blinds. Yeah, 15 big blinds. And we are operating the button with this range here, again, fairly wide. I think it was the same spot as or the same setup, the same lineup as it was on the king 8 offsuited hand. And I basically continued my strategy to open raise very wide from the button, and I was now a little bit deeper, also with the big blind, and not with the small blind, sorry. So I put my opponent in the big blind on this kind of range, so the occasion is traps. Yeah, here and there he's rejamming those suited broadways. He has some aces he's defending with. So the flop comes jack 7-6 suited, and this is something what I meant 3 or 4 minutes ago. You definitely want to bet any jack 5 suited. Don't check it back. There's so many floats possible. You want to bet very light for value. Remember earlier I meant where I was talking about when there are a lot of draws possible, or let's say your opponent can float you relatively wide. He can float you with 9-5, 10-9, 10-8, all those kind of hands. In these situations, you want to bet any top pair, and then we go broke, as easy as that. So don't make the mistake, yeah, I want to check back in order to balance my range. No, that is bullshit. So, but let's take a closer look. What kind of hands do we want to bet? What kind of hands do we want to check? And now, since we only have 50 big blinds, you can see he wants to check the weakest 7x, the weakest second pairs more frequently. Additionally, hands like 6-5, easy check back. It cannot stand a check raise all in. The same for most of the 9-8 combos. The only combos he's betting are the 9-8 with either the 9 in hearts or the 8 in hearts. Without the heart in our hand, he's checking back. Because by having the heart in our hand, it makes it less likely for opponent to have a strong draw, hence his check raising likelihood decreases. And if we get raised, and then we obviously call, or let's say he goes all in, with the 9 in hearts, we have an additional backdoor flush draw in case he has a mate hand. So all in all, having the heart in our range makes or increases the V of betting here. And obviously 9-8 in hearts, we're also betting. Same for 9-8 in diamonds here, but 9-8 in spades and clubs, we just check back. We check back all the 6-5 combos, 6-5, sorry, the 4-5 suited combos. 5-4 suited you can also bet, obviously, in hearts, but the diamond, club, and spades we want to check back. And here you can see the nut flush draws. He also wants to check back quite frequently. So I know this might be a little bit confusing. What I advise here to do is not to, follow the strategy of, 30% of the time I'm c-betting my ace-9 in hearts and 70% of the time I check it back. No, follow the approach of what kind of hands do you want to bet with, what kind of hands do you want to check with. Ace-high flush draws are strong enough to go broke with, so bet those hands and check back your weaker draws, and then your range is automatically balanced. Pure solver makes it very, 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 very perfect. He wants to be 100% balanced. So he also wants to have nut flush draws in his check back range, and that's why he's, as you can see, he's basically weighting certain hands. Ace-3 suited, as you can see here on the right side, 40% of the time he wants to bet, 60% of the time he wants to check. I mean, this is really hard to follow and implement the game. And I don't know anybody who's doing that. So just follow the logic I've been teaching you. That is what most very good players do. And then you're doing a really, really good job. I mean, those are just nuances, really very, very tiny nuances in your game. Whether you check back, nut flush draw, like you check back the ace-5 suited, you bet the ace-9 suited. So, and it's almost not possible to implement that in your game, so perfectly. So what you want to keep in mind, okay, I'm going to bet my strongest draws, which I can go broke with. I check my medium strong draws, which I cannot go broke with. And that's it. And I bet all my value hands, and I bet all my bluffs that have a lot of good backdoor barrel potential. So as you can see, it's something like king-9 off with a king or 9 in hearts, king-8 off with a king or 8 in hearts. Basically any king-9 or king-8 combo. We have one overcard, we have a decent backdoor straight draw. So all of these kind of hands we can easily bet. If you get raised, it's not such a waste of equity. The same with our ace-highs, with the ace-high hearts. I would always bet something like ace-5 with the ace in hearts every single time. Same for ace-8, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, sometimes he also wants to check back an ace-8 combo with ace in hearts, right? Because he also wants to have some hands in his range he can call a turn bet with. But the thing is, since we check back already quite some second pairs, and still a lot of draws, so that will also improve on certain turns. So we're basically perfectly protected on any possible turn card if you follow that approach I am teaching here. So don't make that mistake and think, but what if I'm not perfectly balanced and my opponent can exploit you? No, it's not going to happen. So don't worry, don't confuse yourself, keep it simple. And here PO is really good, and that's basically what I'm also using here. Just the core principles. You want to use the core principles Pio is showing you here, is presenting you, and then follow it. In general, when we bet, since we are so short, we want to use a 30 to 40% pot size bet. Remember, when we're deeper, we want to bet more 50, 67% pot size, so around 2/3 pot size on the flop. And our intention is just to deny our opponent's equity. He's defending very wide from the big blind. So here we want to execute a more smaller bet size strategy on the flop. This is another hand. Here I have around 20 big blinds. So easy open raise. We should never jam. EV is just, it's not so profitable. We make a decent second pair, and here again, the question is, do we check or do we bet? Just think about all the 6 outers your opponent can have. We definitely want to bet, and this is a hand we can also go broke with. Our opponent can easily check bank a hand like check raise a hand like king 4 suited. I mean, we can c-bet our entire. We have queen jack, jack 10. So in his shoes, he has a lot of fold equity if called. He has 5 outs, so he can definitely jam a hand like 4-5. He can jam something like 3-5 suited. He can jam flush draws. He can jam even something like ace deuce or king deuce suited, which is probably pretty reasonable. So if we get action, we definitely want to go broke with. You don't underestimate the strengths of second pairs, especially when it's such a low slash mid card board texture, right? Remember, you have to think, or you have to put yourself in your opponent's shoes. He knows, or he can know, like if you play against a better opponent, that yeah, he knows that you have a lot of broadways and you're going to c-bet those. You have something like 10-9 with backdoors, jack-10, and so on and so forth. So first of all, by check jamming a hand like king 4 suited, he's denying us our equity. Secondly, we will bet call some flush draws, maybe some weaker 4x, and even though we don't have so many, more 4-5, but whatsoever. The point is, don't play your second pairs to passive and check them back just because you have a second pair. So this is the spot where you want to put the apply pressure, bet, and then go broke. So I bet the flop, and by calling, we can already discount some hands. I mean, with this deck size, he should just fast play any 8. So we can discount a few 8x combos. If he's not doing so, yes, okay, he might own me in this spot, but the thing is, with all my hands like Jack 10, I'm realizing so much equity. Whereas if he just jams as 8-7, he's denying my equity. Or if I bet a hand like Ace 10 with backdoors, or Ace Jack, or King Queen, King 10, King Jack, King 5, King 6, so many hands where I have so much equity, he doesn't want me to realize that equity. So now all the other spots, I'm making more money by realizing more equity, as easy as that. On the turn, I really don't mind a second barrel. We can bet around 1.4k. It's very likely that we have the best hand. He probably has something like 4-5, 4-6, or like a weaker 4. So the 2 is not really a scare card. Now he jams, and this is really weird. I mean, this is one of the strongest hands we can have. Yes, we can sometimes check back aces or kings on such a blank since his range is so weak. But he has all the 6-5s, 7-6 suited, maybe a float, something like Jack 10 with Jack 10 and hearts, 10-9 and hearts. So here, even though he's overbetting, he's not really representing a 10. So we have a very easy call. Even though on this spot he owned me, that happens, but in these situations where I have my overcards, I'm going to realize more equity, and in the long run, with all those hands I have, I will make more money when he just calls his 10-8. So actually for my entire range, his call on the flop is better for me. Also, with the ace 4, I realized my equity. I mean, yes, here in this very situation, I'm going to go broke anyway. But let's say the turn is a 9 and the river is a queen. He's not getting any more money, right? I go broke with my ace 4 on the flop, but let's say the turn is a 9 or 10 or jack, and it goes check, check, and he's not improving to a second pair. He checks, and then I'm checking back, and he basically lost 10 big blinds against me. So, or even 15 big blinds. So you don't want to do this mistake here in this situation. And the spot I was just talking about, this is also flop texture, 8-4 deuce, that he misses so often that we can easily bet our entire range as a bluff. Right? This is a spot, remember earlier when I mentioned we can c-bet relatively wide due to the fact that our opponent's range is capped. This is a spot where I would say bluffs 100% of the time. Just bluff everything, but I would check back something like ace-king with the ace in spade, because getting check jammed, I mean, okay, let's go back. I think this is pretty important. So if we have something like ace king and hearts, I would always check back. We have so much equity against a 4 or an 8, or he can check jam, we can flush us, but we cannot bet call. So something like ace king, like with the backdoors, I would bet. I would check back. Because we don't really have any draws here, right? So when there are not so many draws for our range possible, then it's a very dry board, and then most likely the strongest ace highs with backdoors you want to have in your check back range, because those are the highest equity hands you have in your range. And remember, those kind of high equity hands that cannot stand the raise doesn't necessarily have to be draws. Here in this very example, it is ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 type of hands with the backdoors. Something like ace jack with the jack and spades. Something like ace 5, ace 3, I would check back. We can delay the action on the turn. I don't want to bet fold my hand. Ace 3, ace 5, if we have something like in hearts, we can probably even stack off. I'm not 100% sure. I have to also look it up. But just to explain you that concept here on this board texture, when there are no draws possible for us, no straight draws we can check back. I mean, we can basically bet any flush draw. We don't have one flush draw that not has at least one overcard. 6-5 has a gut shot. 7-6 has a gut shot. It's also strong enough to go broke with. Something like 9-7 has an overcard. Most of the time we have two overcards, and those are easily strong enough to bet and go broke. So the next hand, queen 10 suited here, 20 big blinds from under the gun. Also here situation, check raise likelihood is not only caused by shorter stack size, it also depends on the board texture. The drawer it becomes, the more connected, the more people tend to check raise their top pairs, the more protect their hand. That makes a lot of sense. It's a good play. It's a good strategy. It's a valid strategy. Also, they fast play their draws. They know they have fold equity in live call, they have good equity, and so on and so forth. But here on this board texture, the check raise likelihood is not so high, right? It's paired. If they have a king, they don't need to protect that much. Yet, for our hand, we also don't need to protect if we have something like aces or ace jack, queen jack, something like tens, queens. Yes, we can bet. We probably have a profitable value bet. But the thing is, we're also going to get the money on the turn. And we have to be careful. Most of the time, we just have a second pair, an under pair, or aces. But if we go bet, we're probably going to isolate or value town ourselves against the king. So most of our hands, we have two streets anyway. And if that is the case, you want to check. And I would do the same with my draws. I can still represent ace jack. I can still represent even a slow played king. I can still represent an ace, or pocket aces. And you have opponents, especially in lower and mid stakes. They just fast play their hands too much. If they have something like king 10 suited, they see the c-bet and they just want to get it in as fast as possible. So you want to protect yourself against these weaker opponents. And here I want to, you should be aware that these kind of mirror thinking you should avoid, right? Just because it's a good strategy to call a king here doesn't mean your opponent's going to do. They like their trips, they want to put in the money, and they want to get it in as fast as possible, right? So they don't think as you do. So be aware of that, and it doesn't make any sense for you to bet or check, right? Game theoretical wise. It depends how you construct your strategy, but you need to consider that there are weaker opponents that do mistakes. And if they do these mistakes, it would be horrible for you to bet a hand like queen 10 suited, because then you have to fold. So here, take your positional advantage, bring the action on the turn, realize your equity, and then you can still bluff on turn and rivers. That's no problem at all. So our opponent check. Also, the benefit of checking paired boards back is paired boards people definitely underbluff, right? So here, we don't need to be afraid of, let's say we have a weak value, but then we might get bluffed off with our ace size on turns and rivers. No, it's not the case. People are underbluffing because paired boards are always a bit scary. People feel like they don't have so much fold equity. We call them down with our under pairs or ace high, because a paired board is not so likely to have the trips. So in general, people are underbluffing these spots. So we check back and the turn is 6 and they check again. And now it's time to pull the trigger. They bet, they check again, and most of the time this would be a situation where one of these or my opponents or one of the opponents here would start betting and building a pot and to protect their hand against straight draws and flush draws. But since they check again, now we can be relatively sure that neither of our opponents has a king. So most likely like a weak jack, but like a 6, an ace high, or something like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, which they will call once and then fold, or something like ace 10, ace queen, also nut flush draws. So a lot of weak holdings, and it's a really good spot to bluff, even though it is a paired board. So don't be afraid of the small blind call. He can have those hands like nines, eights, a weak jack. Okay, a weak jack might probably call the river one, but all the ace queens, the ace tens, the flush draws that are ahead against us, and they will all fold on the river. So the big blind folds. The river is the same. I would probably stop bluffing on the spade. Yeah, but the 7 is a very safe card, and I just go all in, and he folds.